The air in the cabin crackled with fear, a jagged edge slicing through the chaos as a young woman rose from her seat. Mocking voices swirled around her like a storm. "Who do you think you are, storming into the cockpit?" A man sneered, his words sharp enough to cut glass. The plane shuddered, passengers clutching armrests, their faces pale as the captain's collapse sent panic rippling through the cabin. Laughter, cruel and biting, erupted from the crowd, branding her a fool chasing a moment of glory. But she didn't waver. From the pocket of her worn grey hoodie, she pulled a faded military pilot ID. The name etched in bold, Captain Elena Voss, a legend thought lost to the world for 7 years. In that moment, the cabin fell silent, the truth hitting like a thunderclap. She was no imposter. She was their only hope. This was emotion in motion, and the story of courage was just beginning. Elena stood unassuming, her faded jeans and loose ponytail blending into the sea of passengers on the London to New York flight. No flash, no flare. Just a quiet strength in her unadorned face, her eyes like steady beacons in the storm. The cabin was a battlefield of noise, babies wailing, trays crashing, voices shouting as the plane lurched again. 2 hours earlier, the flight had been smooth, the hum of the engines a soft promise of safety. Then Captain James Harper clutched his chest, collapsing in the cockpit, and the world tilted. Warning lights blazed, the plane dipped and spine stiffened with dread. Elena didn't blink. She slid her sunglasses off, tucking them into her pocket with deliberate care, her gaze locking onto the flight attendant, hammering on the cockpit door. "We're out of time," she said, her voice a low, unshakable anchor. A woman in a tailored blazer, her nails drumming a smug rhythm, leaned forward. This was Lillian, a corporate shark who fed on others' doubts. "Look at this wannabe," she scoffed, loud enough to turn heads. "What's she gonna do, save us with her thrift store vibes?" Snickers rippled through the cabin, fear twisting into mockery. Eleanor's hand paused on her bag strap, just for a heartbeat, then adjusted it with purpose. Her silence wasn't surrender. It was a gathering storm heavy with unspoken resolve. Lillian pressed harder, her voice a blade. "No comeback? Typical. You'll crack before we crash." The words stung, but Elena's focus never wavered, her step steady as she moved toward the cockpit. The plane jolted again, and screams pierced the air. A man in first class, his tie askew and face flushed with rage, stood up. Richard, a hedge fund titan forced into commercial for reasons he'd never admit, jabbed a finger at the flight attendant. "Do something or we're all dead." His eyes flicked to Eleanor, and he barked a laugh, sharp and venomous. "Oh, perfect. The backpacker thinks she's our savior. Sit down, kid." A man in a garish sports jacket, his gold chain glinting, leaned back with a smirk. Tony, a nightclub mogul who thrived in the spotlight, chimed in. "What's next, sweetheart? You gonna fly us with your phone's flashlight?" The laughter around him was mean, brittle, but Eleanor didn't flinch. She reached into her bag, pulling out a worn leather journal, its pages dog-eared from years of secrets. She glanced at a scribbled note, then tucked it away, her calm unshaken. Tony's smirk faltered as the plane shuddered harder, his bravado rattling like his chain. "Keep dreaming," he muttered, but the edge in his voice had dulled. Eleanor stepped closer to the flight attendant, her voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. "Open the cockpit door. I can fly this plane." The words landed with quiet certainty, as if she'd just asked for a coffee. The cabin exploded in disbelief. A woman in a designer dress, her pearls gleaming, leaned forward. Victoria, a real estate tycoon who wore her status like armor, sneered. "You fly a plane? You can't even afford a proper seat." Laughter spiked, cruel and quick, but died as the plane tilted sharply. A tech bro with a flashy watch piled on, grinning. "What's next? Fixing the engines with a bobby pin?" The mockery hung heavy, but Elena's hand brushed a small keychain, a tiny silver plane worn smooth from years of touch. She didn't look at them. She turned to the flight attendant, her voice steady as steel. "You're running out of time." The flight attendant, Mia, barely out of her 20s, her uniform crisp but her face ghost white, blocked the cockpit door. Her hands shook as she pounded on it, her voice cracking. "Captain, please." No answer came, only the plane's groans and the flashing warning lights. A man in a polo shirt, his cologne choking the air, stood up, his voice booming. Greg, a self-proclaimed mogul who loved his own echo, pointed at Eleanor. "This isn't a movie, lady. You don't get to play hero because you're feeling brave. Passengers nodded, their fear feeding their disdain. The plane lurched again and Greg stumbled, his bravado crumbling as reality clawed at him. Mia's voice trembled, polite but firm. "Ma'am, I'm sorry, this is an emergency. Only certified pilots can enter." Elena didn't move. Her eyes, clear and unyielding, held Mia's. "I'm your pilot," she said, and the weight of those words silenced the cabin. The ghost of Captain Elena Voss was ready to take the controls, and the story was about to soar. The plane groaned, its metal frame trembling as the cabin buzzed with fear and doubt. Helena glanced at her wrist, where a battered watch, scratched and worn from battles unseen, ticked on defiantly. Another lurch sent a woman in the back clutching her child, her scream piercing the chaos. Richard, the hedge fund titan, bellowed, "If she gets in that cockpit, we're done for." "Look at her, she's nothing." Elena's gaze flicked to him, sharp and fleeting, her voice slicing through the clamor. "Nothing's flying this plane right now. That's your real problem." Her words landed like a gavel, calm but unyielding, silencing the noise for a heartbeat. This was emotion in motion. Where courage doesn't need a spotlight, it burns brighter in the dark. In the economy section, a woman in a threadbare cardigan, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, gripped a faded photo of a young boy. Sarah, a single mother who'd scraped together every penny for this trip, whispered, "Why are you all so cruel? She's trying to save us." Her voice barely carried, drowned by the din, but Eleanor caught her gaze. A small nod passed between them, a silent vow. "I've got you." Sarah's shoulders lifted, her trembling hands steadying. Lillian, the corporate lawyer, spun on her with a sneer. "Oh, spare us." "She's in over her head." "And you're pathetic for buying it." Sarah flushed, tucking the photo away. But Eleanor's nod lingered in her like a spark. The cabin's tension snapped taut as Victoria, the pearl-clad real estate mogul, leaned forward, her voice venomous. "She's just chasing clout, probably dreaming of viral fame." Nods rippled through the crowd, fear twisting into something uglier. Elena ignored them, slipping a hand into her pocket to pull out a worn leather wallet. She flipped it open, revealing a badge that gleamed despite its age. Captain Eleanor Voss, U.S. Air Force. Mia, the young flight attendant, froze, her eyes wide as she stepped back. A tech bro, Ethan, fumbled with his phone, his Rolex glinting as he scrolled frantically. "Hold on," he muttered, pulling up a 7-year-old article. A grainy photo showed a younger Elena in a flight suit, standing proud before a fighter jet. The headline screamed, "Decorated pilot vanishes after classified mission." A teenage girl, Zoe, earbuds dangling from her neck, peeked at Ethan's screen. Her backpack brimmed with books, her voice soft but piercing. "That's her, isn't it?" No one answered, but the truth hung heavy, undeniable. Victoria tossed her hair, undeterred. "So what? She's been gone for years. Probably lost her edge." Zoe's eyes narrowed, her quiet defiance flaring. "You don't know her story." Eleanor's fingers tightened on the badge, her face unreadable, but the weight of her past pulsed in the air. Whispers spread like wildfire. "That's her? She's supposed to be dead. Why's she dressed like a nobody?" A woman in a cashmere sweater, her face taut with panic, gripped her husband's arm. "She's been gone too long," she hissed. "What if she's a fake?" Ethan stood, his voice sharp. "The news said she died in a mission." "This is a scam." Lillian nodded, her lips curling. "Or a spy. Vanishes for 7 years, then pops up here. Please." An older man, Arthur, in a tweed jacket, his glasses slipping, rose shakily. A retired professor who clung to logic, he quavered. "If she's a pilot, where's her uniform? Why hide in plain clothes?" The cabin murmured, doubt swelling like a tide. Elena's jaw tightened, a flicker only Mia noticed. She stepped closer to the flight attendant, her voice low but ironclad. "You don't need to trust me. You need this plane to land." Her words hit like a shockwave, stilling the air. The plane dipped again, overhead bins rattling, and Arthur sank into his seat, his logic crumbling under the weight of fear. Mia's hand hovered over the cockpit keypad, trembling. Richard roared, "Don't let her in. She'll kill us all." But Mia's eyes locked onto Elena's badge, then her unflinching gaze. Something in that steady resolve made her punch in the code. The door clicked open, and Elena stepped inside, her back straight, her purpose clear. "This is my fight now." A woman in a silk scarf, clutching a designer purse, whispered to her friend, "She's going to ruin us." Diane, a socialite obsessed with status, let her words carry, sharp and cold. Mia shot her a glare before following Eleanor into the cockpit. A fashion executive, Margaret, her tailored coat pristine, stood in first class, her voice icy. "This is ludicrous. She's got no business there. Those clothes? Straight out of a bargain bin." Whispers grew louder, but Mia spun around, her face flushed. "She's saving your lives. Judge her when we're on the ground." Margaret's lips pursed and she sat, smoothing her coat as if to salvage her pride. The alarms blared louder, the cabin's tension a living thing, every eye glued to the cockpit door. Inside, Captain Harper lay slumped, his face ashen, sweat glistening. Eleanor knelt beside him, her fingers swift and sure as she checked his pulse. He stirred, his voice a rasp over the screaming alarms. "Elena, I knew you'd come back." She gave a curt nod, no time for sentiment, and slid into the captain's seat. Her hands danced over the controls, flipping switches, adjusting dials like they'd never left. The plane veered, the horizon tilting dangerously through the windshield. She gripped the yoke, her movements fluid as if the sky had been waiting for her return. "This is who I am." Outside, a young man in a leather jacket, Jake, his hair wild, stood filming the chaos. "This is nuts," he shouted, streaming to his followers. "She's faking that badge. Bet she's a nobody pulling a stunt." His phone zoomed in on Elena through the cockpit window, but her focus never wavered. The plane was hers now, and she was going to bring it home. The cabin vibrated with a toxic mix of fear and skepticism, the air thick with accusations. "She's a total fraud." Jake, the wannabe influencer, sneered, his phone still capturing every moment for his followers. A few passengers nodded, their terror fueling agreement. Mia spun around, her voice a sharp whip. "Put the phone down, now." Jake hesitated, defiance flickering, but he lowered the device, though his live stream had already spread like wildfire. The mood in the cabin soured further, a bitter edge to every whisper. Richard slumped back in his seat, muttering, "If she crashes this plane, I'll sue this airline into oblivion." Victoria crossed her arms, her voice cutting through the din. "She's probably some washed-up pilot who got grounded for good reason. Why else vanish for 7 years?" Ethan, still glued to his phone, scrolled frantically, his face pale. Nothing on her after 2018, just gone. An older woman in the back, her trembling hands clutching a rosary, whispered, 7 years missing. She can't save us. What if she's forgotten how to fly? The plane hit turbulence, a violent shudder sending a coffee cup skittering down the aisle. This is emotion in motion, where heroes rise from the ashes of doubt. Years ago, Elena had been strapped into a different cockpit, one built for war. The memory surged, her hands steady on the controls of a fighter jet, the desert sprawling below, the radio crackling with coded urgency. A classified mission, so secret even her closest allies knew only fragments. Something had gone wrong, catastrophically wrong, and the world declared her dead. She'd survived, but chose the shadows, drifting from city to city, her badge the last tether to that life. Now in this cockpit, those instincts roared back. Her hands didn't tremble. Her eyes didn't falter. She was home. The plane lurched, alarms screaming, but Elena's voice cut through, sharp and steady, into the headset. "Flight 327, this is Captain Voss in command." The air traffic controller's voice crackled, stunned. "Voss, you were declared dead." She didn't blink. "Save the questions. Clear me an emergency corridor." Her hands moved with surgical precision, adjusting altitude, leveling wings. The plane steadied, the shaking easing just enough to spark hope. She's not just flying, she's rewriting her story. In the cabin, whispers of awe began to pierce the panic. "She's doing it," a man murmured, his voice barely audible. A woman cradling a sleeping baby let tears fall, her shoulders trembling with relief. But not everyone was swayed. Paul, a CEO in a pinstripe suit, his briefcase clutched like a shield, shot to his feet, his voice raw with fury. "This is a disaster. We're betting our lives on some AWOL ghost who's probably unhinged." His words fed the fear, murmurs rippling in agreement. Mia, stationed by the cockpit door, whirled on him. "Sit down, sir. She's our only shot." Paul's face reddened, but he sank into his seat, his hands shaking as he gripped his case. Helena's voice came over the intercom, calm as a still lake. "We're through the worst. Stay seated. Stay calm." Her words were a lifeline, but some refused to grab it. Richard stood again, his face a mask of rage. "If she fails, we're dead. I'm not trusting a ghost." Victoria nodded, her voice a razor. A pilot who vanishes for years? She's hiding something dark. The woman with the rosary shook her head, her voice frail. Miracles don't come from the dead. Eleanor didn't hear their doubts. Her world was the cockpit. Gauges, dials, the horizon tilting through the windshield. Turbulence hit again, screams erupting, but she didn't flinch. We're coming in, she told the tower, her voice steady. Prepare the runway. In economy, a young couple, Sarah and Tom, clung to each other. Sarah's voice broke as she whispered, "She's going to save us, right?" Tom nodded, his eyes locked on the cockpit door. He'd seen Elena's badge, felt the quiet power in her presence. "I was cruel earlier," Sarah confessed, her voice thick with shame. "I laughed at her." Tom pulled her close. "We all did. But she's fighting for us anyway." Their words, soft but heavy, made nearby passengers glance down, guilt flickering in their eyes. The descent was brutal, the plane shuddering as landing gear groaned into place. Elena's grip on the yoke was unbreakable, her focus a quiet fire that burned through the chaos. In the cabin, panic began to shift to something deeper, something like reverence. Ethan lowered his phone, his hands trembling. She's actually doing it," he stammered, disbelief cracking his smug facade. Mia stood by the cockpit door, whispering to herself, "Please let her pull this off." The lights of New York glimmered through the windows, closer now, a beacon of hope. The alarm still flashed, but their wail had dulled, tamed by Elena's command. Her voice came over the intercom again, steady and sure. "Brace for landing. We're almost home." This was her moment, and she was rewriting the ending. Susan's hands moved with practiced calm, securing seatbelts, but her eyes kept flicking to the cockpit, a quiet fire burning within her. She'd heard the passengers' venomous words, each one a barb that stoked her anger. Pausing by Sarah, the single mother clutching her son's photo, Susan leaned in, her voice a fierce whisper. "That woman in there? She's the real thing. I've seen pilots buckle under half this pressure." Sarah nodded, her fingers tracing the photo's edge, drawing strength from Susan's conviction. Moving down the aisle, Susan's voice rang out, steady and commanding. "Everyone stay seated. Captain Voss has this in hand." Some passengers met her gaze, their doubts softening, while others, like Diane, gripped their designer purses, faces taut with suspicion. Then the plane's wheels kissed the runway with a jolt, skidding briefly before slowing to a stop. The cabin exploded, cheers, sobs, strangers embracing in a wave of raw relief. This is emotion in motion, where heroes don't just save lives, they rewrite destinies. Inside the cockpit, Elena remained in the captain's seat, her headset off, sweat dampening her hair. She leaned back, exhaling a breath that carried 7 years of shadows. Mia opened the cockpit door, her face flushed with awe. "You did it," she choked out, voice cracking. Elena gave a single nod, rising slowly, her presence a quiet storm. As she stepped into the aisle, the cabin fell silent. Eyes turned to her, some with shame, others with gratitude. Richard looked away, his jaw clenched, unable to meet her gaze. Victoria's pearls gleamed too brightly, a hollow mask for her unease. Zoe, the teenage girl with earbuds, stood, her backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes alight with admiration. "You were incredible," she said, her voice carrying across the cabin, bold and unapologetic. A few passengers nodded, their faces softening, guilt creeping in. Elena paused, meeting Zoe's gaze, her small smile saying what words couldn't. Zoe sat, hands trembling with excitement, whispering to herself, "I want to be that fearless." Her words sparked a flame, a ripple of hope in a sea of doubt. Paramedics rushed in, guiding Captain Harper out on a stretcher. He gripped Elena's hand as he passed, his voice faint but fervent. "Still the best, Voss." Her smile was brief, a silent acknowledgement, before she hoisted her bag and moved toward the exit. Passengers crowded closer, some reaching out, others murmuring apologies. "Thank you," a woman sobbed, tears streaming. "I'm so sorry we doubted you." Elena didn't respond, her focus fixed ahead, her steps steady. Outside, reporters swarmed, cameras flashing, voices shouting, "Captain Voss, where have you been? Are you really back?" A security officer, Marcus, his badge glinting, stepped forward. A former soldier who'd studied her missions. He snapped a crisp salute, his eyes bright with respect. "Captain Voss," he said, voice low but resonant. "Welcome back." Eleanor paused, bag in hand, and returned a nod, her lips pressed in quiet acknowledgement. The gesture stilled the reporters, their cameras dipping for a moment as Marcus stepped aside, his posture unwavering. At the jetway's edge, a small crowd of airport staff buzzed with whispers. Carlos, a young mechanic, clutched a crumpled newspaper clipping. A photo of Elena from years ago pinned in the break room as a tribute to lost heroes. He stepped forward, voice trembling. "Is this you?" Elena's eyes flicked to the image, her fingers grazing it, and she nodded. It was. Carlos's face broke into a grin, and he turned to his colleagues, voice rising. "I told you she wasn't gone," the crowd murmured, their awe growing as Elena pressed forward. She stopped at the jetway's end, reporters closing in. Her gaze swept the chaos and she spoke, her voice quiet but piercing. "I was never gone. I was waiting for the right moment to return." Her words landed like a thunderbolt, rippling through the crowd, rewriting her legend in real time. She turned, walking away, her bag swinging lightly, ignoring the reporters' shouts. Behind her, the passengers who'd mocked her stood frozen. Richard's phone buzzed, a text from his boss firing him for the scene caught on Jake's livestream. Victoria's social media imploded, her cruel remarks quoted and shared, her sponsorships vanishing. Ethan, the tech bro, stared at his phone, hands shaking as he deleted a tweet mocking Elena's clothes. Too late as screenshots spread, his followers turning on him. The older woman with the rosary gripped it tighter, her lips moving in silent prayer, her doubt replaced by humility. Mia watched Elena disappear down the jetway, her eyes shining with reverence, whispering, "She's the real thing." In the terminal chaos swirled reporters, staff, passengers, but Elena moved through it with purpose. A tall man waited, his suit simple but sharp, his presence commanding. Michael, her husband, needed no words. Their hands met, fingers brushing with unspoken trust, and they walked toward the exit steps in sync. A young woman in a janitor's uniform, her name tag reading Lila, stood by a cleaning cart, eyes fixed on Elena. She'd heard the commotion, working the late shift unnoticed. Stepping forward, she held out a folded note, her handwriting shaky but sincere. "Thank you." "You're a hero, ma'am," she said, voice firm. Elena took the note, her eyes scanning the words, and her face softened. "Thank you," she replied, tucking it into her pocket, her voice warm but restrained. Lila's eyes gleamed as she stepped back, gripping her cart, watching Elena move on. The terminal buzzed, but Elena and Michael were an island of calm, their connection a quiet force. She didn't need to explain herself. Not to him, not to the world. Her truth was in the plane's safe landing, in the passengers' silenced doubts, in Michael's steady hand. 7 years in the shadows, but she'd never stopped being who she was. The world had forgotten her fire, but now it burned bright again. This is emotion in motion, where second chances come not with fanfare, but with quiet, unshakable strength. Life doesn't always hand you a second act. But when it does, it's not loud or showy. It's a steady hand in a storm, a plane touching down against all odds. Eleanor Voss didn't need to prove her worth. She lived it, every steady breath a testament to her truth. For anyone who's been doubted, dismissed, or pushed into the shadows, her story screams one thing: you're still here. You're enough. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below, hit that follow button, and join us at Emotion in Motion as we chase stories of heartbreak, redemption, and the courage to rise again.